Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan James, and many of you know I am the chair of the Board of Selectmen here in Sandwich. And this is Bud Dunham, our town manager, and Ralph Vitacco, our new town planner. And we're here today to talk a little bit about the zoning articles that are coming up at the special town meeting, which is being held on November 13th at 7 p.m. at the high school. We want to talk about, there are several different zoning articles. We're going to present the easy ones first, and then we're going to talk about the wing school rezoning, which tends to be a little bit more complicated. Hopefully by the end of this session, people will be able to know a little bit better about where the selectmen are coming from. We proposed the article for the wing school because we know that in a couple of years, the school department is going to release that school, the collaborative will be out, and we really do need to do some advanced planning for how we're going to manage the reuse of that building. So that is why the selectmen proposed the wing school reuse. So hopefully through this conversation, you'll get an idea of what exactly is involved and what is not involved with the zoning. So, Bud, you're going to start it off?
Sure, I'll go ahead and I'll do a brief explanation on the first three warrant articles for the special town meeting, which again is on Monday, November 13th at 7 o'clock at the high school. The first article relates to an easement, clarifying an existing easement for Eversource. Eversource has been dictated by the state to do an energy reliability project for this part of the Cape, so they're going to be running another utility line along the high tension easements that already exist from the Bourne switching station to the West Barnstable switching station. What's interesting is most of their easements date back to the early 1900s. So in 1927, there's certain easement language that's used throughout the area, which at the time was the Cape and Vineyard Electric Company. And then just so happens that there's a piece of town land that we bought using land bank funds in 2000 in the midst of the Maple Swamp Conservation Area, uses language back in 1927 when most of their other easements used language from 1940. So the actual size of the easement is not changing at all. It's not growing by an inch. All we're doing is changing the language so the 1927 easement matches the language from the 1940s. And that will allow the company to go ahead with their project, which is really important for the entire Cape Cod for electric reliability. The Conservation Commission's already reviewed all this and unanimously supports it. It just requires a vote at town meeting, no other action, just a vote at town meeting, no legislative action. And again, I think we're going to put a map up on the screen in a few minutes that will just show what that easement area looks like today and what it'll look like tomorrow with just the language changing. Articles 2 and 3 are interesting in the sense that they're both respectively a town bylaw and a zoning bylaw that address a moratorium on recreational marijuana. For a quick background, just to refresh people's memory, it's important to remember that in May of this year, so May 1st, 2017 annual town meeting, the town approved a zoning moratorium through next June 30th, so June 30th of 2018. That just related to zoning. A few days later at our annual town election on May 4th, the voters approved recreational marijuana moratorium, which based on the laws that existed at the time was the first step in what we knew was going to be a two-step process, again, for the laws that were in place at that time. Then it so happened that in August of 2017, the legislature at the state level changed the laws. So the assumptions that we were operating under in May, some of them stayed the same, some of them changed. So what we're having to do now is the second step in that process, and town council has recommended both a town bylaw and a zoning bylaw that ban recreational marijuana establishments. They have no impact whatsoever on medical marijuana dispensaries, again, strictly recreational marijuana establishments. So the wording on both articles, the second article number 2 is for a town bylaw, article number 3 for a zoning bylaw. The wording's the exact same language, and all it will do is ban recreational marijuana in town. The phrase that's used in both articles is called strictly marijuana establishments because that's how the state law defines it. So it won't say recreational marijuana, but I'll explain that that's what these articles do. And again, the first article, meaning Article 2, is a town bylaw, only requires a simple majority. The second article is a zoning change, so any zoning adoption requires a 2/3 majority at town meeting. The planning board is actually holding their required public hearing on the zoning portion of that ban next week. So we'll be able to report out at town meeting on November 13th what the board decides next week. And so that brings us to Article 4, and I'll open it up to the experts on that article.
So Article 4 is the article that addresses the rezoning of the Wing School. And I just want to say right up front, there is no intent by the Board of Selectmen to make any plans for the distribution of the Wing School. This zoning article is really to address possible or potential uses for the Wing School should the town meeting later decide they want to keep the building and reuse it in some way, or sell the building and reuse it. The area right now is zoned for residential only, and municipal use, of course. And any other use has to be approved by town meeting via a zoning article. So Ralph, if you could explain what the zoning article does,
Sure.
and then I can get back to it.
No, absolutely. As you were pointing out, this is really a response of the selectmen being responsive to the needs of the people in the survey, which you did. Last year, the selectmen conducted a survey of what to do with the school, and there were 762 respondents. 53% said to keep the Wing School under control of the town, the Wing School property, and 46% suggested to sell it. In the suggestion to sell it, there were things such as office, artists, museums, adult care facilities. When the selectmen went back to look at the zoning bylaws, they see that those possibilities didn't exist with current zoning. As Sue pointed out, it is zoned as a residential 1. So in order to achieve those goals and sort of open up those possibilities for future use, we're putting forth this overlay. So what an overlay is, we're literally laying on top of the existing zoning these special uses. And again, the special uses are design office, co-working, cooperative office, artist studios, museum, assisted living facilities, a child care facility, nursing, adult care, cultural facilities. These uses, for the most part, do not exist in the residential 1 district, but all of these uses exist as a special permit in the village district, which is right next door. So this is contiguous with the neighborhood. So in order to be responsive to what the people are asking for, we're creating this overlay district. So in the future, if the selectmen decide to sell that area, which they would have to go to town meeting to get approval from the town, it opens up a wealth of opportunities to go out and seek potential buyers.
The overlay district, if you look at a map, does include the fields and so on, but there is no intention to sell the fields ever. Certainly at this point in time, with this Board of Selectmen, even if the Board of Selectmen were to bring an article at a future town meeting to request the town to sell the building, the fields as they are will remain. So that's an important point, because
Right.
I think a lot of people, when they look at the map and they see that overlay, they're going, oh my gosh, the fields are included. And they have to be included in the overlay,
Right.
but they don't have to be included should the town want to sell the property. Am I
Right,
correct?
absolutely. For overlay purposes, we had to include the entire 30 plus or minus acres, which is the municipal use. The fields represent about 20 acres, and the school and the parking lot represent 10 acres. So it would be up to the selectmen if that is the intention, to present it to town meeting for the sale to delineate that.
And just a couple other things. Like, I think people need to understand that overlay districts aren't unique. I think we already have 8 or 10 of them in town for things like parking overlay districts, the ground-mounted solar overlay district, the wireless telecommunication district. So it's a common tool towns use, as Ralph said, to sort of overlay some additional uses and special restrictions on property that's different from the underlying zoning. But all the uses that are allowed in the underlying zoning, as Ralph explained, the R1 district are still allowed in that area. And the other thing I think that's interesting is, as you guys both know, we've had 2 very qualified architectural and engineering firms do extensive studies of the wing school structures themselves. And the most recent study that was done a little more than 2 years ago came up with a number of different options. So if this zoning overlay district doesn't pass, it sort of restricts some of those options that we were looking at, and that, again, is a decision to be made down the road, but this is really the first step to understand what we can and can't do moving forward.
Right, and I think that's important because there are only just so many things you can do with that building. It does cost approximately $250,000 a year just really to have it sit there and do nothing, essentially. And that obviously is problematic, which is why we're trying to plan ahead of time so we're ready. There are a couple of options. One, of course, is to tear the whole thing down and turn it into a park. For that, you wouldn't need the zoning change, but any other reuse, if the town were to decide to sell the building, we'd have to know what could go there. And so that's why I'm really emphasizing that it's really important to know that this is not a proposal to sell the building. It's not a proposal to keep the building. It is a zoning proposal that will give the town options should the town decide to sell the building in the future.
And many of those major options all require going back to town meetings.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
The public will have another bite at the apple when that's
Absolutely. So this is just the beginning of the process. If the zoning doesn't pass, then that really limits our options. That only leaves.
As it stands now with the residential 1 district,
Right.
It's only zoned for residential use, municipal use, museum, and child care facility. So it is very limited. So you're right, Sue, that by approving the overlay zoning amendment, it does open up the options
Right.
For the town.
Right. And this is just the first step in what will be steps, because it ends up being very sequential. So this is the first step. We'll see how this goes. And depending on how this goes, we can make recommendations for future steps. Like all the other zoning articles, this is a 2/3 vote. So please come to town meeting and let your voice be heard. So many times, just a small number of people get to make decisions for the whole town. So I would really encourage people to come on Monday night, November 13th at 7 o'clock at the high school and let your voice be heard. So thank you very much. Thanks, Bud.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. Goodbye. Thank you.